This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 682, entitled Masculist Screaming at British Feminazi Politicians. Description: Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary in the British government, wants to equate extreme expressions of misogyny by men with terrorism and then prosecute them. This raises a fundamental question. Masculists express extreme misogyny towards gender criminal women, wanting such women to be wiped off the face of the earth by being effectively exterminated by men, by being left to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at. Masculists are at war against gender criminal women, so statements of extreme misogyny are war talk to Masculists. So, will Yvette Cooper prosecute Masculist leaders for terrorism, or will she bother to become biconscious by bothering to learn some Masculism and hence understand the source of Masculist hatred against gender criminal women? If she remains monoconscious, she may lose the man in her life, if she has one, and become an even more hated woman by Masculists and MGTOWs than was Susan Wojcicki, the late former CEO of YouTube, who promoted feminist channels and deleted Masculist and MGTOW channels. If a gender war heats up, Yvette Cooper may even lose her life. Now the fire itself. Masculist screaming at British feminazi politicians. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In August of 2024, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary of the UK, expressed her desire to see the British government treat expressions of extreme misogyny as terrorism and hence be prosecutable. Here is a link to an article in The Guardian on this topic. https://www.theguardian.com/society/article/2024/AUG/18/extreme-misogyny-2-b-treated-as-form-of-terrorism-under-government-plans. The moment I saw this, my adrenaline raced. What the Masculists are saying about gender criminal women is about as misogynistically extremist as it is possible to get. Since what are the Masculists saying about such women? ? We are saying that we Masculists are at war against such women, that is, gender criminal women, who commit horrible, decades-lasting gender crimes against men, such as the big three of women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering. Anyone of either sex who examines these horrible gender crimes that women commit against men comes away with the conclusion that these women are indeed gender criminals and fully understands why Masculists have such a hatred of them and are at war against them, aiming to wipe them off the face of the earth by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, which, by the way, is a process well underway in the US amongst young men who, according to a reputable polling company, in brackets, Pew, P-E-W, Research Center, found in 2022 that 63% of young men in the US, quote, in capital letters, don't even date young women. These young men see young women as undateable because they feel that young women have been so poisoned by feminist ideas that they have made themselves repulsive to young men. This refusal of 2/3 of young men US men to date young women causes such women to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and utterly rejected both socially and sexually. As a result, over the past year, we have seen hundreds of TikToks of young women in tears lamenting the fact that young men pay them no attention, are not coming up to them, are not dating them, are not sexing them, and are not marrying them, and certainly not giving them their sperm. Most educated, in brackets that is with college degrees, young men in the US are now well aware of the toxicity of the divorce courts in the US, taken over by the feminists in the 70s and made so toxic for men that now in many Western countries 2/3 of young men refuse to marry and reject paternity, since they absolutely refuse to face a 1 chance in 4 of being butchered in a feminist-dominated divorce court system that treats men as cash machines to be robbed and abused. Masculists are abolitionists. Masculists argue that it was men who gave women science-based medicine, so women now have a life expectancy of 85 years. Men gave women the pill, household gadgets, higher education, etc. So that women now, with their 0, 1 or 2 kids, have a career window of half a century. So Masculists are now standing up, pointing the finger at women, saying in thunderous moral terms, quote, "Now that you women can work, you must work. Anything else is manslavery, and manslavery will get you killed, in brackets, slowly, by being forced to rot on the shelf, close brackets, by being totally ignored by by men, masculistic men, who won't even pump and dump you, who will treat you as manslaving, divorce-raping vermin to be wiped off the face of the earth," end quote. Masculists are abolitionists who see manslavery as literally 1,000 times worse than was Negro slavery, given the numbers. There were several million Negro slaves in the US in the early 1800s, and there are several billion man-slaves in the world today who work for a woman for decades of his life, thus manslaving him for decades. Masculists see a close historical analogy between the moral abomination of Negro slavery, that was the root cause of the US Civil War, and the much bigger moral abomination of manslavery. Masculists are at war against the fluffies, in brackets, a masculist term, for a traditional woman who expects to live off the labour and money of a man, who does not bother to FIP up, in brackets, FIP, F-I-P, equals financially independent person, close brackets, by not bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and college, who simply expects to leech off a man for decades, close brackets. Fluffies are career incompetent, who then drag a quarter of married fathers into the hated feminist-dominated divorce courts and have him butchered. He will lose custody of his kids in many Western countries with a probability of 90%. He will lose half his wealth and stuff to her. He will lose his house to her so that she can raise her kids in it. He'll be forced by the divorce court to make payments to his children, whom he will barely be allowed to see. And if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no legal nor moral obligation on her to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up. Thus she continues to be a parasite of him after the divorce, the way she was before the divorce. Masculists have 2 main enemies: the fluffies, who are seen by Masculists as manslaving, divorce-raping vermin, to be exterminated by Masculists by being forced to rot on the shelf. And the second group, fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges who butcher one father in 4. Everyone knows that the divorce rate is roughly 1 in 2 in many countries. Half of marriages fail. In half of those divorces, the ex-wife turns into a vindictive bitch, out to, quote, "take him for all he's got," end quote, in the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts, which operate according to the fluffy model, That is, assuming that the divorcing wife is a fluffy, instead of assuming that both parties in the divorce, the mother and the father, are fips. Masculists, particularly masculist theorists, are very conscious that the fipping of women, the creation of a fip society, in brackets, that is, in which both sexes, particularly young girls, are socialized by parents and educated by teachers and professors to be fips, close brackets, will go a long way, capital letters, in solving most of men's gender issues, particularly with manslavery and divorce rape. This is the end of part 1.